Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. And today I want to debut for you a brand new segment called How to Fight, where I basically go through one character only and describe top to bottom in as much detail as possible all of the different ways to use the character in the most efficient way possible for either or including PvE and PvP if it's applicable to the character. So to start us off for the very first character to sort of christen this segment, and of course if you guys hate it I won't do it anymore, but if you like this segment then let me know in the comments, like the video, etc., and I will do more of these in the future for other characters. I thought it would be nice to start off with Sharon Rogers because everybody gets her at tier 2, so even if you never get this last to tier 3, although she's amazing, you will be able to take these tips and use them, and it's basically universally applicable to every account now in Marvel Future Fight, even returning accounts because of the Shield Academy. So we're going to start off with a little bit of the strategy for building the character, and then we're going to go straight into how to fight using Sharon Rogers. But this sort of stuff at the beginning is applicable for every single character, and so the first basic principle that you want to establish when you're learning how to fight with a character in Marvel Future Fight is what the skills do, what each skill does, and how long the cooldown is for each skill, because that will allow you to know which skills you have to prioritize first or second or third, because generally speaking the skills that do more, you want to do those first. You want to get those effects going right away. Let's say they're long-term boosts or effects or buffs. And then for the cooldown, that's really important to recognize which skills you can spam and which skills you're going to have to reserve for the big punch, and so on and so forth. Now, because Sharon Rogers, just to identify before we go any further, because Sharon Rogers is primarily, almost exclusively a PvE character, we will be developing, we will be talking about this and developing the conversation based around the idea of you exclusively playing her in manual combat in any sort of PvE content, which includes the Danger Room, Giant Boss Raid, World Boss Ultimate, ABX, Shadowland, but does not include game modes like Timeline Battle, because that is a completely different scenario, and she doesn't excel there very much at all. So taking a look at her skills, she has mixed physical and energy attack, which is an important thing to remember for Reflect. As far as her cooldown goes, she has short cooldown on most of her skills, 15 seconds being the longest here, along with an 11 and a 13. So she's a character that you can really establish a tight rotation with, where you can use all 5 skills and you're comfortably able to go back to the skills quickly without having a super long cooldown. She doesn't have any skills with 20 seconds, 25 seconds, 30-second cooldowns. So with Sharon Rogers, there's always something to do. As far as the actual skill effects go, without going into detail of why, because you can find that out from other resources, her third skill is by far her best skill. It unlocks the most damage potential, and then her combination of 5 and 4 are also her most damaging skills. Now, I know not everyone has her uniform, so what I'm saying is not necessarily always applicable to every iteration of Sharon Rogers, and it would be very hard to do a video going in depth on all 3 versions of this character, and even harder for future characters like Captain America, who has multiple uniforms. But luckily in Sharon Rogers' case, her third skill is her best skill among all 3 uniforms, and following her third skill, her fourth and fifth skills do provide the most amount of damage. It just really depends on when you can proc on the fourth skill and when you can proc on the fifth skill, as you will see. And when I say proc, I mean activate your damage obelisk. Now, whether you're using a CTP of energy or whether you're using a regular damage obelisk, like for example, this one right here, which has an increased damage by 200% for 1 attack's 5 seconds, along with some cold damage. Whether you're using one or the other, we will get into that discussion as well. So with that being said, we've analyzed the character from a number of different aspects and angles. We've established that, you know, mixed physical and energy damage, lots of power on 3, 4, and 5, not much going on 1 and 2, but they still have some utility. We'll talk about 6. Every ultimate skill should be good. And then because of the cooldown, assuming you have maximum skill cooldown, and that's pretty much the prerequisite for all of these how to fight videos, getting your skill cooldown to 50% ASAP. Now we'll jump into the actual gameplay. So the first thing you want to do with Sharon Rogers is you want to use her third skill. Her third skill is going to activate her damage accumulation, which is going to give her massive self buff. So you want to start off every rotation with the third skill. but you want to cancel the third skill because the third skill itself doesn't do very much damage. It's got a low number of hits, and it's also doesn't have, the hits don't have a lot of damage behind them. How do you cancel a skill? Well, this is the basics of how to fight. You cancel a skill by doing one of two things. You either move if the skill allows you to move. Now I'm dragging the joystick, as you can see, just above me, but I'm not moving. So in this case, this skill roots me down. It freezes my character, so I actually can't move around while I'm casting the skill, even if I wanted to. So that's the first way of canceling a skill, is to move your joystick. You can do this with characters like Cable's 5th skill. If you don't have the opportunity to do that, if you can't cancel the skill that way, then the other way to cancel a skill is by pressing another skill. So in this case, we're going to cancel 3 into 5, and we're going to still get the accumulation effect, which is that sword with the sort of dotted line, but then we also combine that with her 5th skill, which gives us a lot more damage. It's a heavy hitting skill, tons of hits, and it also provides us with that 7 seconds of 25% increased crit rate. So that is sort of my basic damage rotation and sort of my opening sort of damage sort of skill combo for Sharon Rogers. 3 cancel into 5, and you have to do it fairly quickly there, and that would proc on her CTP of energy, and because of the chain hit damage, her 5th skill has about 20 to 25 hits. That will help you with the chain hit damage. Another thing you can do with Sharon Rogers is you can do 3 cancel 5 cancel 4. And you can do 3 cancel 5 cancel 4 for a multitude of reasons. You can do it to get, of course, the 3rd skill accumulation, the 5th skill crit rate, but then you want that 4th skill for the damage. Now, the 5th skill damage and the 4th skill damage are similar, but some people think that the 4th skill damage is better. Some people think that the 4th skill has more damage of a particular type, like energy or physical. The beginning of the 4th skill, where she hits with the blades, actually is physical damage, but the laser blast is energy. So you do have to be paying attention to that if you're fighting against a physical reflect stage for Shadowland or something like that. But that is the basic combo for her damage proc, and that's how you're going to get the most run and the most sort of production out of your Sharon Rogers, is by going ahead and using that 3 cancel 5 or that 3 cancel 4 combo. Now I want to show you guys what this looks like in real time against a battle, because of course you guys are seeing, basically the numbers aren't really popping up, nothing is really happening here. So we're going to go ahead and jump in with this team here. We're not going to use strikers because we want to be able to visibly see what's going on with Sharon against Cull Obsidian, but you'll basically see that there's 2 different combos that you can achieve with Sharon Rogers that are effective. You can do the combo of 3-5, you can do the combo of 3-4, or you can do the combo of 3-5-4. I personally prefer 3-5, and we'll discuss why in a second, but I first want to show off the differences. So this would just be 3 into 5. You get the accumulation, you get the damage from the 5th skill. It does a decent amount of damage. It's really not that bad. Here's the next one. We've got 3 cancel into 4. That one also has some good damage as well, even though we missed a bit of the proc activating. And then we have the alternate one, which is 3, 5, and then 4. And this one also wasn't very good in this case because I wasn't able to trigger my damage proc, but this is also another option for you, although I don't think it is the best option. There are variations on this as well, of course, but let me show you a couple of rotations now doing a full rotation of skills. This rotation that I'm going to refer to now, this sort of combo, is what I would see as the safest combo for Sharon Rogers, because her 3rd skill offers her 5 seconds of immunity, and you use that with her 5th skill to do damage. Then with 1 second left on her immunity, you do the 4th skill, which offers her an iframe, and then you can use her 2nd skill for another iframe, and then chain that back into the whole rotation. So what it looks like at the end is this sort of bouncing up and down, and you use the 3rd skill along with the 5th skill, which the 3rd skill offers you protection, and the 5th skill offers you damage, and then the 4th skill offers you damage and iframe, and you basically just chain that. And that's a way for you to protect yourself in case you're taking a lot of damage with Sharon Rogers. You protect yourself from damage in addition to dealing a lot of damage, although you don't get to use your damage proc on your 4th skill. Another thing you could do is you could delay your 5th skill. Now remember, it only has 7 seconds of crit rate, so what you can do is you can do 3 into 4 for your proc, and then with 2 seconds left you can do 5 and you can do 2. Then you do have to do a little bit of running around, so it's not as safe, but then you do 3 back into 4 with a few seconds remaining on your 5th skill crit rate buff. Now, the disadvantage of her 3 into 5 combo is that whenever purple skills appear, as you can see here, he's shooting these purple lines at me, they will penetrate her immunity. So you have to be very careful when using Sharon Rogers' 3-5 combo, because if you get penetrated, you'll take a bunch of damage and you'll die. So that's why we delay the 4th skill to use that iframe defensively. We still died there because we took a lot of damage, but that is the basic principle of the rotation called, the rotation that I would refer to as the safest rotation for Sharon Rogers. We use the 4th skill defensively to get that iframe, because besides the 5 seconds of immunity on her 3rd skill, she doesn't have any other defensive abilities. She just has the short iframe on 2, and she has the iframe at the end of 4. So these are basically the strategies that you want to employ, whether you use 5 at the beginning or you use it more towards the end. It's primarily there for the crit rate buff, but you can also use it as a setup for damage, and then you can use the 4th skill just as some extra damage on top, and then you use 2 to get right back into 3. Another thing that you can do, although it is a little bit more tricky, is that you can try to get the 5th skill to go off and then cancel it into 4, so you actually get the chain of both attacks. You get the 20 hits on the 4th skill, and you get the 20 hits on the 5th skill to land on the proc. This is a little bit more challenging because it requires you, again, to not trigger the proc too early. It's sort of like cables, you know, 4 cancel, 3 cancel, 2 cancel, 5. You're trying to stack everything on that last combo of skills. It definitely is more difficult, but it's definitely something that can yield a lot more damage. But again, it's more risky because you're using 3 and you're using 4. So by the time those 5 seconds of immunity are up, you won't be able to protect yourself and you'll have to just run away. One combo that I do think can be a bit bad is the combo of 3 into 4, because although she has the beginning of the attack, which is not an iframe and a chance to get hit, the rest of the skill actually is an iframe. So after you jump into the air and she's iframing, you actually can't take damage. You can't take damage in an iframe, therefore you can't accumulate for her Vanguard Lance accumulation. So that's personally why I prefer to do 3-5, because 5 is not an iframe. It leaves you perfectly open to getting hit. And with Sharon Rogers, you want to get hit to accumulate more damage so that you can do more damage with subsequent attacks. So that's personally why I like to use that strategy there. But some people like to, you know, stagger, use 3 into 4, and then get that accumulation later on, like right here with the 5th skill, and then lead back into the 4th skill with the proc. I keep dying, so we keep going back into it, but this is basically the tenets that you want to use when you're fighting as Sharon Rogers, and you want to basically prioritize all of your strategy and all of your timing on 3 cancel 4 and 3 cancel 5, and then 4 somewhere in between, and then using 2 defensively for that iframe. You really never use her 1st skill, and if you use her 1st skill, you're just using it to try to build up her tier 3 skill more. Now what I want to do is I want to introduce the tier 3 skill. All of this right now has just been sort of how to fight as Sharon Rogers tier 2. If you have a Sharon Rogers tier 3, this is what it would look like in real time. I would use her 1st skill and then cancel that into the 4th skill just to get the extra sort of bump up. So, you know, just to get a couple more points added to her tier 3 skill accumulation to get to 100%. And then when we get to the tier 3 skill, we did a very, very quick 3 cancel 5 cancel 6. Now we did a 3 cancel 5 cancel 6 there because we want the crit rate damage from the 5th skill. Now we're sort of in an awkward situation. I tried to do something a little bit more, you know, a little bit more jazzy, a little bit more improvisational with sort of a 5-3 cancel 4. That didn't work. So now we're gonna go over into a 3 cancel 4, which I also think was pretty weird. Not the best rotation here, but let's try to get back to that original. Okay, we were late there on the proc. This is basically how not to play as Sharon Rogers right now. That was a late proc. But we did get accumulation, so now we can use her 4th skill with great effect because we still have the accumulation from her previous 3rd skill. So there's a lot of overlapping buffs with Sharon Rogers that you have to take into consideration with her 5th skill crit rate buff that lasts for 7 seconds, in addition to the 10 seconds of accumulation that you get with her 3rd skill. Now there, what happened there, why I did so much damage, is because I was actually able to do that sort of very rare 3 cancel 5, let it hit, and then 4 combo. That doesn't happen very often. It's very hard to manufacture, and you basically need to have about 1 second left on your proc in order for you to get the timing down right. But now let's try doing our 3-5-6 combo. We get the accumulation from the hits, and we land it perfectly for tons and tons of damage. So that would be the perfect way to set up your 6th skill. You get the buffs from the 3rd skill, you get the buffs from the 5th skill, and then you quickly cancel that into 6. If you don't cancel 5, or if you don't cancel 3 fast enough, going into tier 3 skill, you will activate your damage proc, whether it's an obelisk or a CTP of energy, it doesn't matter. And when you activate it, you will then lose that damage. See there, I activated it too early, so now the tier 3 skill is not going to do as much damage. You can see it did good damage, it did 1.5 bars, but that is a lot less than it was doing when I had it perfectly timed. It was doing like 3 or 4 bars, and that's the difference there, because the damage proc actually ended up landing on her 5th skill rather than her tier 3 skill. So you basically have to juggle the buffs of the 3rd skill. You have to try to get hit, but you have to keep in mind that it's within that 5-second window. You've got to use the 4th skill and the 5th skill strategically to try to stack up enough damage and to get those buffs going with that 25% crit rate. And then you have to, work in the tier 3 skill, which is basically just a modified rotation that we were talking about with 3 cancel 5, but instead of doing 5, you cancel 5 into 6. And then you basically just replace the 5th skill with the 6th skill, and then you can do 2 things after that. You can either do the 4th skill, which you'll have accumulation, but you won't have a proc for, or you can wait and you can do 1, 2, 3, and then when the proc is about to show up again, you can do 4 and land the 4th skill on the proc, and then you can start to deviate and do a rotation where you use the 4th skill for the proc and the 5th skill as a buff, and vice versa. Really quickly before we go, I just want to show you guys that with her alternate uniforms, you still want to use the basic same principle. So in this case, her 3rd skill gives you that buff. It also has some hits, but again, it takes a long time to wind up. There's just not a lot of usefulness here. So what you want to do is you want to cancel that into 5, and you can see here 5 is a very delayed iframe. It's kind of like 4. She smashes you, and then she goes up. So in that case, you want to use this, and then basically while this is happening, you'll get hit, you'll accumulate, and that will rack up your damage. Taking a look at 4, it's kind of like her 4th skill where it's just an immediate iframe. So it wouldn't make sense to do 3, 4 because you're an iframe, you're not accumulating, so you're not doing more damage, you're not getting more of a buff. So in that case, much like her Dark Star armor, you would want to do 3, 5, hit your proc, land it, do the damage, and then whatever's left over, you can pop the 4. You also have the iframe on 2. There we go, the same jump, and 1 is still pretty useless. So you definitely still want to do a very similar rotation, which would essentially be 3, 5 proc, so your damage from your obelisk, and then with 1 second left on your immunity, you do that, then you do this, and then you go right back into 3 into 5. It's similar as well for her other uniform for Sharon Rogers. The only difference with her other uniform, if I can find it here, is that, oh, we have to go over here to the other uniform Sharon Rogers. Aha. The only difference here with her Light Star armor, or her Starlight armor, is that her 5th skill creates some sort of, continuous effect. So essentially what you want to do is you want to do the 3rd skill, and again, it's got a long wind up with just 1 or 2 hits. So what you want to do is you want to cancel that into 5, and then you can either proc on that, which is essentially that dark orb plus the slash, but what a lot of people like to do for this uniform is to get the ball going and then cancel that into 4, and then 4 is very similar to her 4th skill with her other uniform, with her Dark Star, where it's essentially a couple of hits and then it bounces into an iframe, and her 5th skill is like her new skill 5th, where there's no iframe at all. So basically you can do 3, cancel 5, well, you gotta get the orb there, and then 4, so there's a bit more timing involved because you gotta let that orb release. So it's a lot like, I feel like her Starlight armor, the rotation is a lot like that modified rotation that I showed you guys, where we did 3, cancel 5, the proc didn't land, didn't activate, didn't trigger, and then we did the 4th skill and it did trigger. So you get the residual hits of the 5 energy piercer on top of the full damage of Buster Lance buffed and increased by your damage proc or your CTP of energy. So that is hopefully a very helpful guide on how to fight as Sharon Rogers. If you guys enjoyed it, let me know. If you guys have any suggestions for how to improve it, also let me know. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you later again. Take care.